Well, good morning, SV. This is the start of Passion Week. It's the week where we remember the last week of Jesus' earthly life. And this is unlike any Passion Week we've ever seen because of the shelter in place, because of the impact of the coronavirus and that it's having on our lives, on people's lives around the world in so many different ways. I just thought for this week we could reflect just very briefly each day on the events of Jesus' last week on earth and see how hopefully that might just allow us to set our minds and our hearts upon him this week as we remember the fact that this week was meant for him to continue his journey towards the cross, to die for us. And we will celebrate what that means this weekend through our Good Friday and Easter gatherings. And so on Sunday, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey with crowds waving palm branches and yelling, "Hosanna, come and save me." But on Monday, today's Monday, and so on Monday, Jesus visits the temple. And what he finds there is he finds people selling animals for large amounts of money, and it almost resembles like a flea market kind of thing. And what he found there were people who were taking advantage of the religious system in order to make money, to try to sell animals to people who were needing to sacrifice or wanting to sacrifice in order to get right with God. And so even though there was all this commotion and all this hustle and bustle in the temple, Jesus goes in and he confronts the people that are the merchants that are selling animals in the temple. And then he does something really curious that we ask about when we read the Bible. And if you take a look at Matthew 21, it's the part where right after the temple, Jesus curses the fig tree. And people might ask, Jesus, why does it matter that this tree isn't bearing any fruit and you are saying, may you never bear fruit again? Doesn't that seem a little harsh for an inanimate object? But if you read the passage very closely, you see that this tree had leaves and it was expected to bear fruit, and yet no fruit was found. Kind of the same thing that was going on in the temple. There was all this activity, all these things going on, and yet Jesus was saying the heart of what the temple was made for, to worship God, to come and get right with God, to know who he is. It's just not happening. For me, Passion Week has always been, it's always been a mix of things for me, ever since I became a pastor. On the one hand, you know this is a really important week in the church calendar and you want to put your focus in the right place. And yet, I'm always preparing for baptisms or many other things to get ready for our in-person large group gatherings that we know are going to take place. And there's always a certain amount of stress or anxiety or busyness that I feel during Passion Week. And this is unlike any Passion Week we've ever had. Normally, some of you would be preparing for speech and debate state championships. Some of you would be taking visits to colleges that you've gotten into as you're trying to make your final decision on where to go. Some of you might be competing for CCS championships or getting ready for that. Some of you might just be waiting till the last minute to file your taxes, or their work might be stressful because of fiscal year end stuff and all these different things that are a part of our normal lives. But we know this year's not normal. And if you've been watching the news yesterday, our Surgeon General was interviewed saying this is going to be the saddest and most difficult week in American history, in recent American history. And he compared it to along the lines of something like Pearl Harbor or 9/11 because of the expected death toll that and just infection rate that many people are projecting will spike this week. And that's what makes this week a Passion Week unlike any other. And yesterday, as we looked into God's Word, Daniel Gillum was encouraging us as Jesus tried to encourage his disciples by saying, "Fear not." He said, one thing we got to do right now is just to get right with God. Our futures are so uncertain. We have no idea what our world's going to look like tomorrow, let alone a week from now or down the road. And so the best thing that we can do is get right with God. And it makes me want to ask myself today, is my life just marked by activity and doing things? Because I love to do things and stay busy. That's just part of my personality. But am I going to remember to get my heart right with God? And if we're living in the most unique and uncertain and even scary time that probably any of us have ever seen, then what a better time for us to pause and ask ourselves, am I remembering the heart of what this week is all about? And so on this Monday, I wanted to encourage you with that. Can you just really come before God today and examine, where am I at with you? Do I remember all the ways you've shown up for me in my life and how good you are, how loving you are, how faithful you are? And am I going to remember that this week as we celebrate what the cross means, what the empty grave means this week? We'll have more reflections from Jesus' last week on earth during this week. But I pray that we would be able to just come before God today, quiet our hearts, and reflect on what this week really means and what it's really about. So stay tuned for more. I will see you all soon.